What's up, world? What's up, world? What's up, world? Homie Webbs and Mike Lang back again one more time. It is what day is it? What Sunday?
It's Monday Eve.
Monday Eve. Sweet Jesus. Because of the basketball, I mean, March Madness is going over. Like me and my pops talk on a pretty decent interval, but we talk every day when March Madness pops off. So I kind of lose track of time. It kind of makes me makes me wonder what day it is. But like as soon as the show is over, there's more games tonight, which makes like March is the least productive month. Then you the only beef webs that I have is that the women's tournament is going on right now at the same time the men's tournament is, because it makes it a little difficult to go back and forth. I do like the ladies. The ladies be hooping. I hate Kentucky men's basketball team, but I love the Kentucky women's basketball team, and so I do watch them when Notre Dame isn't on. But it's kind of and I saw this. We got to do some light conversation before we get into the topic. I did see that you posted on your social media about some inequities in terms of men's sports and women's sports. Care to elaborate a little bit about those things?
Yeah, I was wondering if you bring that up. I happened to be flipping through TikTok and saw one of the women on the women's basketball, one of the women's basketball teams. I don't follow basketball at all, so I'm sorry, I don't know who it was. Had shared video of the men's workout area versus the women's workout area. It was one set of weights, and I don't think they went above like 20 pounds. And the men had like Olympic rack after Olympic rack all set up in this giant area and all kinds of equipment. And the women had some yoga mats and some weights. They also did some side by side of like the food that they were being offered, and which is extra frustrating because like as an athlete, how you fuel your body does matter and it makes a difference. And they also did a side by side of like their swag bag they got basically. And again, huge disparities between what the men got versus what the women got, which is extra frustrating because for folks who don't know, there's something called Title IX, which basically says that there should be a men's sport and a women's sport in college, and I believe it also applies to K-12, and that they have to be treated equally. And that's definitely not what's happening. I am mildly less angry to share that they did provide the women with more suitable equipment.
After they were
I'm
shamed,
not gonna.
after they were
Yeah,
shamed.
after they were
I mean, it
shamed
wasn't
big
like
time. Yeah,
I don't give people credit for stuff after they've been shamed like that. That you
yeah.
just like bow under puppet pressure at that point.
And it sucked because there was a one of the athletes had posted video of their new equipment space, and still not totally on par with the men's. But it was posted with like hashtag thank you NCAA, and I want to be like, no, you don't. No, you don't get credit for that because you got shamed into doing the right thing. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
frustrating.
If you do not follow Dawn Staley, the head coach at University of South Carolina, on social media, follow her. She's an amazing leader of people. Generally, she was one of the top 50 leaders of humans by Time Magazine in 2017, or leaders in the world, rather. Really, really insightful lady. I was a smaller point guard playing basketball as a younger person, of course, high school and whatnot. And Dawn Staley was at University of Virginia playing. It really was one of the people that, even given that time where it wasn't 24-hour everything and the internet wasn't that big of a deal or whatever, somebody that I watched very, very closely as a kid. I'm a fan of the sport of basketball. Again, I'm a Notre Dame alum, so the Notre Dame ladies are usually very, very good every year. So it's good to see that, but it's really sad that in 2021 someone made a decision to have drastic differences between the facilities of both the men and the women when they play the exact same sport. Like there's no fundamental difference between men's basketball and women's basketball. Um, it has been hilarious sitting and watching some of the games, like going back between the men's games and the women's games, and seeing some of the athletes perform at very high levels, and then have that idea that some people perceive that the sports are not the same sport, which is also, I think, a little troubling.
There
Uh,
was a lot of that in the comments of those videos. Like, women don't bring in as much money, but the NCAA is a nonprofit, so it
but
shouldn't matter.
that's a bunch of. I mean, the
Yeah.
nonprofit status of the NCAA. Look, this is where I would got retort in terms of the money thing, because this is why I think you have to have the Olympic model in terms of these kids be able to be paid for their services, and have commercials and all that kind of stuff like that. And I think that would help equalize a lot of the exploitation that's here. Because then kids could go and sell their own images and get in commercials and do whatever they need to do on social media in order to do what they need to do. But I really am. It has been interesting for some of the troglodytes who have posted things about them not being the same sport, and you got you probably couldn't take a female basketball player home. She'd probably get you. But it is what it is. I don't know if you've you don't watch the Aces?
I don't know what that is.
So Las Vegas, we do not have a men's professional basketball team, but we do have a women's professional basketball team. And they're a really good team. Asia, what did I always make some of the name? Not Asia Smith. Oh my goodness, South Carolina. Oh my gosh. Anyway, Elise Cambridge is the person I'm going to tell the story about anyway. Elise Cambridge is Australian. They traded for her a couple years back. She's like 6'9" or something crazy like that. Really tall lady. And this dude was talking trash on social media, and she was just giving the guy work. And she was telling he was too small the entire time she was giving work. But so, I mean, there is, it is hilarious. A lot of the just talking and whatnot that happens. Being the brother of two NCAA athletes who played tennis, two women tennis players. I can't handle either one of my sisters in tennis court. There's nothing I can do. I run around. They would laugh at me as I floundered around the tennis court. So, just why be mean, man? I guess that's my point. Long-winded point.
Insecurity.
Yeah. Even if the sports weren't equivalent, to walk into a place and say the dudes got all this stuff and the girls have very little stuff, one would have assumed that the same organization did the same coordination for both events, wouldn't have said, you know what, we need to have similar accommodations in both venues. Or I don't know.
You would think.
I mean, it's kind of like stark, in my opinion. Like it's stark. But
speaking of Stark, wait, wrong cinematic universe. My bad.
Yes, wrong one.
I did see related. So I did see this video today where this lady was talking about learning when she gets super involved in learning about a new topic or a new skill or something. That's called Tony Starking. There was one scene, I think it was from the second Avengers movie. He was even the first one, where they were like, when did you have time to learn about blah, 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 some fancy science word that's probably made up and not real? He's like, oh, last night. So their family calls it Tony Starking. The other thing, get super deep on a topic.
Other thing people got to realize is the MCU has had major misses. Like outside the first Iron Man movie, the rest of the Iron Man movies are garbage, man. Second movie is garbage. The third movie, the Extremist movie, is that's when they wasted the Mandarin for no reason. Like that, those are garbage movies. Like hard.
I like the second one. I didn't care for the third one. The third one, yeah.
The second one is it was lazy. They took Whiplash and made him the evil Iron Man, and you're like, okay, yeah, that's lazy, bro. And they mixed Crimson Dynamo and Whiplash and turned them into one person rather than anyway. We're totally off topic, but this is what it is. We can talk comic book movies forever and ever. On Thursday, the Zack Snyder cut of the wonderful Justice League film was released. The first film was horrible. It was created partially by Josh Whedon, who Webbs and I had an earlier discussion about Josh Whedon and his problematic behavior. But the movie was almost universally panned. They got a mulligan. There was But years ago, there was this like movement. Oh, there is a Zack Snyder cut that exists. It's all this extra
It was
film
like
and stuff.
mythology. Yeah, it was like mythology for the longest time. Like, oh, what about the Snyder Cut? The Snyder Cut. I mean, it was so bad. And I love the DC TV universe, but the DCEU is so painful. I have avoided watching some of the DCEU movies because they're just so bad.
Absolute facts. And so, movie came out Thursday night. If you haven't seen it, it's a 4 hour and 2 minute movie. So you're gonna have to either cut it up
It's
into.
basically two movies.
You're gonna have to space it out that you do it over for a long period of time,
Or
or
like 4 episodes of a show or something.
because I stayed up all 4 hours and watched it. My wife went to sleep. She watched about an hour, went to sleep, and got back up, and she didn't miss anything really. Like it was she was able to infer what happened previous to her nap by just like what was going on. Like, and it was, if you're a stickler for starting and finishing things, then watch all 4 hours. If you're not, it. I will say fundamentally, and Webbs, you have not seen the movie yet, correct?
I haven't seen the Snyder Cut. No, I just watched the original on Saturday for the first time because, like I said, I've been avoiding certain movies. I also watched Aquaman. I went on this whole DC
Which
binge.
Aquaman is a good bad movie. I mean, it's kind of cheesy, flimsy.
I like Jason Momoa.
Well, most women like Jason Momoa. I mean, and in the Snyder Cut, he takes his shirt off like 35 times for no reason, and you're like, okay, I get it that you're an attractive man. Stop making me feel bad about myself. Thank you. He was just taking his shirt off for no reason. Like, okay, all right, appreciate that, dude. Thank you for making me feel bad. And I'm kind of looking at my wife like, don't get no ideas. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, so we're going to talk a little bit tonight about what kind of things could we learn from redoing movies, reimagining things. The two movies are two different films, but when you watch them, if you haven't watched either movie, I would challenge you to watch the original movie, the movie that was theatrically produced by Snyder at the beginning, and then Josh Whedon with a lot of recuts and edits and things like that. Watch that movie, and then watch what Snyder's actual vision of the movie was in the 4 hour flick. Totally different films with totally different outcomes. They're not the same movie. It's really an interesting idea to apply to education as well, given some of the things that are currently going on, reimagining units, looking at tools differently, looking at your workflow differently, Frankensteining old things and creating something new as well. A lot of things you may have sitting on the sidelines and whatnot. But we're going to start, as we always start, with our Ask a Software Developer question. And Webbs, in terms of your work as a software developer, is there any point in which you have to remix what you're doing?
Oh my God, in software development, everything is a remix.
How so?
Well, so a lot of what we do is figuring out if someone already solved the problem we're trying to solve or part of the problem we're trying to solve, and then mashing that together with other things to solve the problem. That's basically all it is. So it's a lot of searching to see what other people have done and then combining those things together to get a solution of some kind to solve the problem that we're specifically trying to solve. So it may be, for example, actually, here's a good example, working on the Dante project, right? So working on the Dante project, which is a top secret project that we're working on right now. That's not important. So I had this problem, and there were a couple different components to it. Essentially, mail wasn't quite working. And so I was like, okay, maybe it's the specific mail tool that I'm using, or maybe it's a certain setting, or maybe it's some other problem. So I started looking at, okay, do people have this problem with this particular mail tool? Do people have problems setting up the tool that I was setting up? Do people have problems with some other thing that combines those three things that I don't realize is causing the problem? And so what it ended up being was there was a setting that I had to tweak, but I went and looked down the path of okay, let me make sure the version is right on this mail tool. Let me make sure that, the way that it interacts, like, can I just test this one component? And so it was thinking about, like, how could I Frankenstein these answers together to try and figure out exactly where things are going wrong. And that is essentially my job in a nutshell. Is like just Frankensteining things together to solve the problem that I'm trying to solve.
So, do you ever have an idea, or does anyone ever have an idea in your group or your team or whatever about something, and then produce a solution that later on you're like, nah, that doesn't actually encapsulate the vision that we had for the product or for the service or whatever, and when you go back and redo it.
Yeah, that happens a lot too. Like in application development, sometimes we'll come up with what we think is the solution using like a microservice or something, and then we'll go back and say, like, no, that's not really like what we want that thing to do, or we want to split it in a different way. I had that happen on my current project actually, where like they had a specific microservice, thought that that would be how things would work, and then realized like, no, there's this little piece that kind of can be broken out onto its own, and then this can be its own thing. And so yeah, that happens a lot because I mean, really, it's about the whole way that we work is about pivoting and adjusting in real time. What was that?
So phone, I always forget to put my do not disturb on sometimes. Indeed, indeed. Um,
It sounded like a duck quack.
yeah, it's the stupid it's
Quack.
the default one.
Oh.
Interesting. So go ahead and say what you said again.
Oh, I said like the whole all of the way we work is that we are constantly like pivoting and reevaluating if a thing really works the way that we would expect it to, or if it fits the vision of what we're trying to do. I think too, another good example of like sort of like remixing in tech is in tools, version control tools like Git, and then their like cloud-based counterparts like GitHub. You can it's called fork a repository. So if somebody has built a tool, you can then make your own copy of it and tweak it and change it and like use that base, but make it your own.
Like you do in
So
Skyrim.
that like you do in Skyrim.
Yeah. So like tons of people will make.
I don't play Skyrim.
So Skyrim. I think of other games like better example. So big in NBA 2K right now. So because the NBA season is going on, playing NBA 2K and whatnot, and when you play the league, and a couple of but I'm gonna use the league because that's what I'm playing right now. The whole point is you can play 80 seasons, right? So I never play. I play 1 or 2 seasons before I get bored, and I'm like, oh, I'll wait till next year. But you play 80 seasons, and what people want is the actual draft classes of the next year. So you want the actual names of the actual people who will be eligible to draft, right? So there are people, and God bless all the people that do this, who go through and build manually every player that will be draft eligible for that next season. And you can download those from other players of the game, and then you can go back and you can tweak them if you wanted to, whatever. You can build your own packs and send them out or whatever. So it's kind of like this cool crowdsourcing. It's kind of good and it's bad because the people that you build don't ever get any money off. Like this is still at this point still an amateur athlete whose image is being distributed and utilized for free by people, which looks, it speaks to the exploitation of the amateur athlete. But it's kind of cool that there is this crowd sourced way to kind of get information out there that then you've done the bulk of the work for me. I can go and then I can tweak it to if you made a small mistake here, or if I want to go and make this person taller or shorter or change their shoe type or whatever, I can do that.
Yeah, I'd say that's very similar.
Super cool, super cool. Now, let's talk about education now. So, perspective. Now, director's cuts are not anything new. The concept of a director's cut is not new. If you're a movie buff, there are certain like director's cuts you have to have. You generally, when you get a director's cut of a flick. Like Blade Runner comes to mind immediately. Like the Blade Runner's director cut is one of my favorite movies to watch because it's different than the cinematic or the theatrical views. Extra different shots and angles of the same thing. You have added some added features and whatnot, added content. But the director's cut is a different interpretation of the same movie. And when we start talking of webs about classrooms, right? Oftentimes we look at a lesson as a single event that cannot be duplicated again or gone back and redone. Once we throw that into the ether, like it's over with and we move forward. And one of the interesting things about the Zack Snyder situation is even though it took a couple years or a year and a half or whatever to get it to where in its 4 hours, it is still he examined the previous flick and people's dissatisfaction with it. There had to be hours upon hours upon hours of just footage all over the place for him to kind of look at and build a story there. But I think the interesting thing in terms of perspective webs is he didn't look at it as finished, as okay, this is I can't release this because something else exists that has the same title. Do you think there's any benefit from that perspective for classrooms and educators, or is that just like a one-off thing that movies can do but teachers can't?
No, I think that so one of my hangups for a long time was like seeing somebody do something on social media and then feeling like I couldn't, like I can't do that. Somebody else already did it. It already exists in the world. How could I possibly, I can't do that lesson or I can't do that activity or whatever because someone already did it and it's done and now it can never be done again. And when I started really thinking about that, I realized like that's an awful way of thinking because sometimes the thing that gets created like after the fact or the thing that comes second is sometimes better than the original just because you have that benefit of okay, that first thing has been released, whatever it is, whether it's a product or a lesson or a website or a service or whatever, and people are interested in the thing, but now it's like, okay, how can I take the feedback from that original thing and integrate it into my version 2 of whatever the thing I'm building is?
I mean,
So
absolutely.
I think it totally applies in so many situations.
So I mean, that this as soon as the Snyder Cut was released, I sat watching the movie and I thought about Canvas. It's the first thing that came to my mind watching the flick. It was a situation in which if I wanted to go back in the Canvas course and change things, I can change things anytime I want. And those changes are instantaneous. Those changes will go, forward. I thought about that and the idea of what innovation actually means, right? It's taking something that's existing already and making it better. It's not reinventing something. It's saying just kind of what you were talking about. Hey, I saw this lesson on YouTube or, Twitter or whatever it was. And then suddenly this person did it this way. I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to add this angle to it or move or apply this particular tool in this new way that's going to reorient my user to something different. I mean, that's my favorite thing to do is to take tools that are meant to do one thing and then say, we're not going to make it do that. We're going to make it do something totally different. I think I got that vibe from the Snyder Cut. And we're going to try to minimize as many spoilers as possible in this episode. But if you have not watched the original flick, watch the original flick. To see the difference between the interpretation, the perspectives that were taken with the same footage, and a lot of times, like, a lot of additional footage because the Snyder Cut is another 2.5 hours in addition. Also, how perspective and footage changes the narrative. So adding more does change stories. So one of the big beefs was Cyborg's story and the
Storyline.
utilization of Cyborg in the original movie, which as an African American male, having that person being the primary, black person in the movie, but be just totally wasted in that film, and then seeing the Snyder Cut, and you're like, You telling me all this footage existed and this dude still chose to tell this guy's story in this whack way? Wonder Woman, the way she is like highlighted and the things she's able to do, and you look back at the original film, and you're like, all right, dude, for real? Like, there was a lot of just these additions, Webb, that I thought were like really powerful additions. That this footage was available to Josh Whedon, and he chose not to use it. And so I guess that's another thing. A lot of times as educators, we have a ton of tools at our disposal as just people, strategies, whatever. What do you think some of the challenges of teachers utilizing the tools, the strategies of people in their environment to their the best of their ability? What are the reasons why perhaps we don't do that as much as maybe we should?
I think part of it is being overwhelmed with the amount of things that there are and not being able to make a decision. Like, just start somewhere. But it's really easy to get caught up in, oh, should I use, Loom for this? Should I figure out how OBS works? Should I use a tool like Ecamm? Should I do, are these even the same? Am I using two different tools for two different tasks? Should I use Keynote? Should I use slide decks? Should I use, Sheets or Excel or PowerPoint or slides, or like you can drown in the number of tools that exist out there. So I think that's part of it. I think sometimes too, I know I struggle with like out of sight, out of mind. So if I don't have, if you can hear what's going on in the background, that is Kofax behind my green screen, ferociously wiping his face on the carpet.
What's up, Kofax?
So I think some of it is that, and some of it is forgetting that what you have at your disposal, and forgetting that, like, I'm thinking like here in the Valley, resources that exist, like Springs Preserve is a great resource in the Valley, but I think it's easy to forget that that's a thing that exists when you're just, sitting in front of your computer, trying to figure out like, what do I need to churn out, really focus on whatever curriculum you've been given, instead of thinking more broadly, because then you're back to that whole, now I'm overwhelmed and there's too many things problem. I mean, those would be the two things that come to mind for me, but like, what do you think are the challenges with something like that?
I think this is something that I've harped on over and over and over again. And nothing bears this out more than this movie, right? It's called the Snyder Cut. But to infer that only Zack Snyder worked on this movie would be false, right? Like, this movie took a lot of different people doing a lot of different jobs who were specialized in the particular job that they were given in order to make this vision, this reimagining of this product, a reality. What we do as teachers is we sit in a room and we close and lock the door and say, I have to learn how to do all these things. I have to be the production manager, the costume, and that's where the overwhelming comes, in my opinion. When you don't utilize it and say, you know what? Webbs is a better costume designer than I am. It would be silly of me to not only direct the movie and rewrite the screenplay, but also do the costumes and this and that. And I'm not, instead of taking a step back and say, how can we make this as efficient as possible? How can I take the 5 people that all teach 4th grade and we can cut things up and divide things and play to our strengths? Is this constant focus on what can an individual do? And that, to me, causes burnout. It causes people not to do their optimal work. It causes people, I mean, just think about just you and I, right? We could not function with this business as I could not do this by myself. All right, it's not something that's possible. I could attempt to do so, but to attempt to do it by myself would be a less efficient, less efficacious way, and also would probably end me just quit tossing the towels in and saying, you know what, this is not even worth it, right? So there is the to me the big thing to me that really was undersold here was the Snyder Cut is the name of the flick. But there are thousands of people who touched this movie to make sure the movie was a success, not Zack Snyder setting up all night, cutting film and getting more film. Nah, He didn't score the film. He didn't act in the film. You know, there's all these different hands that have to touch this thing. And for you as an instructor in 2021, given all of the cool people who are out in the world, all the people that just happen to be at your school, people that happen to be in your district, to say, I'm going to go it alone every year, you know.
That's funny because I was thinking about that this morning. So I like to watch Late Night with Seth Meyers, and I'll watch, like, if I miss, since the pandemic and they switched to publishing everything on YouTube, I watch it a lot more. And he does a monologue and he does a little segment called A Closer Look that I usually catch. And I was thinking, because usually when he's doing the monologue, he'll, like, when he tells a joke that one of the writers wrote, he'll say, so-and-so wrote that joke. So-and-so wrote that joke. And it's really become apparent to me, like, even, like, it looks like, and it gives you the perspective or the perception that Seth Meyers is responsible for all of this writing, and he's just this incredibly funny dude. I mean, he probably is a pretty funny dude, but, like, his monologue is written by a team of writers. Like, all these segments are written by a team of writers. This is just one task, and they have, like, 10, 15, 20 people doing this one task, all the same task. So yeah, like I would definitely, I mean, I think that's an ongoing theme of a lot of our content in general is like, don't try to do it by yourself because you're going to have a bad time.
Even
and I think the product is better.
Richard Pryor had people that wrote for him. Like everyone has people that write for him because you don't have time to write all your stuff all the time. Just that's something that's possible and plausible. Right? The greatest of us, the greatest presidents had speechwriters. Why? Because they're people who can articulate what you're trying to say a lot better than you can a lot of times. So, but teaching is the undiscovered country that just wants to do this like rugged backpack. I will do all the things myself, and you're like, all right, that's not the best way to do this, fam. And this is why you have people leaving the profession in flocks. Because the pandemic situation, which should have brought people together to say, I don't know how to do this. Can I join up with you so you can lead me into the the future? It didn't do that. It still put people on islands again. And it's just.
So let me ask you this. Why do you think that is? Why is it that education is such a siloed, isolated profession?
So 3 reasons. 3 reasons. All right. And again, this is from the perspective of me as a kid, all right, then me as a college student, and then me as three different perspectives from 3 different age ranges, because I think about this a lot, actually. So as a kid, right, so my elementary school experience was probably atypical. We didn't have classrooms at all. It was open air school, no classes whatsoever. So the interesting thing with that, if you think about like your offices, right? The offices that don't have cubicles, that just everyone sitting in, and people complain about the noise and this snap. I had the opposite experience. All right. First of all, I didn't know that schools had rooms until I went to middle school. I thought every school had no rooms. It was just like whatever. But the interesting thing being a quiet, introverted kid was I was sitting in the back of the classroom, and the genius, I don't know if this was purposeful genius or accidental genius, they didn't have all the classrooms by grade level lined up to one another. So you would have a 3rd grade classroom next to a 4th grade classroom next to a 5th grade classroom. So you could accidentally overhear the next year's content of stuff. And you could hear the cadence in the teacher's voice. You kind of knew what made the person mad, etc. So you kind of like you were getting like this head start on the next school year, which I didn't really realize until I was in middle school, but whatever. Now, what I did realize though is the very competitive nature of teaching, right? Like there is this stated or I mean not unstated competition, right? And I think it stems from people not being paid what they should be paid for. So you have this situation which I'm not going to collaborate with people because I want to prove that I'm the alpha here, right? And I saw that over and over and over again, kind of reflecting on my practice in terms of this teacher was really good, and this other teacher didn't talk to this other teacher because there was there was definitely some tension there, right? And then in college, right, my master's degree, one of the things that I started looking at in terms of how teachers taught, we train teachers in the agrarian system that produces education, right? You don't train teachers to be outside the box thinkers and innovators and stuff. It's like, look, this is what it is. This is how you do it. You will teach this subject, that subject, that subject, and that subject. You give the kids the grades, and you move on. There's not, at least in my experience, and the more and more I talk to more of the teachers that are coming out, there was no collaborative. Hey, we want to get everyone sits together and let's collaborate on this unit, see how things work, and everyone puts their own little piece in it, and we can build it together. Now everyone has something that was better than if we did it by ourselves. That doesn't happen. It is you.
Well,
go ahead.
But if you think about it, right, like that's the message that we send from really early on, is that if you collaborate and submit the same thing, you're cheating.
Oh, I mean, but it goes back to what you said previously, right? It's this looking at somebody's stuff and saying, I'm going to take the kernel of what you're talking about, and I'm going to add my own funk to it. So, I mean, I love restaurants that are mixtures of different cultures, like again, Comex or Chinese soul food and stuff like that, where you're taking, okay, this is something that's traditional to this group of people. I'm gonna go and add my own funk to it and make something different. But without the existing thing, right? Without that first thing, there is no innovation to anything. And unfortunately, I do think what you just said, like, we call it cheating, despite the fact that it's being efficient. No one has to start from scratch. We all start from a baseline. You want to add your own flavor to it, great. But everyone has the same idea. And you also benefit from the fact that, you know what? Webbs has this great strategy for doing X, Y, and Z. Let's take that strategy so every one of the kids can benefit from that. Lang does this thing over here. Let's add that to everyone's thing so everyone benefits from it, rather than I can't do those things, so my kids are just not going to have the opportunity to do that. That's silly.
Name a job where your boss writes you up for cheating.
Cheating in terms of what?
Cheating the same way we would define it in elementary school. Like, you copied my paper, you turned in work that was similar to mine.
I mean, music. Like, it's essentially, I can't sample things unless I clear it. So I have to give credit to the person who's inspired the work or whose melodies I copied or whatever. I mean, in theory, but I don't see those as collaborative ventures, right? I'm not working with the original artist of the song. I'm just taking your song and kind of, interpolating or whatever. But people being in the same room at the same time, producing content, to me is a totally different, that's not cheating. That's me saying, I can't do certain things and you can. Let's sit together and let's do. It's sports. That's what that is. I am not 6'5", 330 pounds, right? So I couldn't play the offensive line. If you put me on the offensive line, the quarterback's gonna get sacked. So we take the big 335-pound dude and say, look, you're gonna make sure that Mike can run really fast. So he's gonna run the fly route or whatever it is. It's collaboration. And I think the concept of, and we've talked about this in previous shows, the cheating thing. What is cheating other than using ingenuity in a lot of ways? Like, the kids go in and look at the code on the back of the page and say, oh, that's the right answer. Cool. Well, if your task is so menial that I can go and find ways to, shorten the time I need to be successful, what was the point of the task? Mm-hmm. And you can't cheat on your job. If a customer says, I want an app that does X, Y, and Z, right? You could borrow different concepts from somebody, but you can't go and wholesale take somebody else's app and say, here you go, there's your app. I just took this from Joe Blow down the street, and here we go, our job is done. There are components of what you're talking about that either inspire you or you utilize in order to do your job, but you don't wholesale take somebody else's work and pass it on at your own.
I mean, depends on the size of the work, I guess.
If
you find a block of code in GitHub and you take that code and use it in your code, like, is it the size of the code that matters?
It's the spirit of the thing. So my thing would be, so if you're saying straight up and down right now, you are contracted to build an app or build a service or whatever it is for company X, right? And company X says, these are the parameters. I want to do this, that, whatever, and all these other things. All right. one would assume that they hired you because you have the ability, if you had to build that from scratch. Even if you didn't steal or borrow things from other people, you would have the ability to say, I can produce what you're asking me to produce. Now, if you shortcut that process by saying someone already has components of this thing built, then I'm just going to take and utilize my thing. And these are open source. I'm not ripping anybody's copyright off or anything like that. Why not? If they're open source tools, they're open source tools for a reason, right? People are saying you can use my stuff, which makes sense. But if you're saying that I took somebody's copyrighted material, straight copied their stuff and threw it in, I got paid for it, that's a totally different concept to me. Totally different. Totally different. And I think that's where the idea of what you do and the idea of true collaboration, we're all sitting in a room and we're saying, what is everybody's strength in this room? This is this and that and this and that. All right, cool. We have to teach Hamlet. How do we teach Hamlet from utilizing all the special gifts we have in this classroom so that one person doesn't have to write the entire unit? We all have pieces of ourselves in the unit and we kick it out.
And I think we know that at a certain level, because if you think about how school is already divided, right? Like, we know that one teacher can't teach every subject K to 12. We know that's too much. So, like, where's the breakdown that happens? Like, at some point, it seems like we get this idea that, okay, now this isn't too much and I can go off on my own into the world.
But it also goes back to the teacher too, right? Right? Like, the system is not, first of all, the system doesn't care how the work gets done. I think we overvalue this. Oh, the system will punish. The system ain't punishing nobody, fam. The system doesn't even know what's going on half the time. Right? The system isn't creative enough to have a beef with what you're talking about. And case in point, all right? And this is why I don't ask for permission very often at all in teaching. Like, if you're not, and this is going to sound like tremendously horrible for your first or second year teachers, but once you get, vested, it's very little that can be done to you. As long as you do not you don't hit a little kid, and you don't steal money, you can pretty much do what you want. Now, that being the case, that should empower you and embolden you to take risk and to experiment with how things work. And also to have a situation where I'm going to go and do some Looney Tunes stuff with other similarly skilled and similarly oriented teachers to kind of make things look differently to what they are. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, how can we tweak those things so they do work? Go ahead, Webster, if you could say something.
Yeah, I think one sort of caveat is there are narcissistic administrators out there who will make people's lives miserable if they don't like what they're doing.
Oh, I totally get that. I totally get that. My thing would be this. This is why the beautiful thing about living in a metropolitan area, it may be difficult in a rural area or whatever, is there are tons of jobs, there's tons of schools, there's tons of things we can do. So if I've had some administrators that, I haven't seen eye to eye with, peace, bro. I mean, when it comes down to it, there's plenty of jobs out here. The other thing is, right now, we should be looking at a lot more teacherpreneurs coming out of the pandemic, given that there is still an appetite for students to be able to work at their own pace, virtually, in person, whatever. And there should be a number of teachers who are looking at this as an opportunity to say, how can I free myself from the bonds of oppression that would be narcissistic administrator telling me I can't do some things that I know work? All right. So part of the other thing I would say is you're going to have that Justice League mentality where it's us six against the world, right? It can't be a situation where you faint in the face of pressure, right? Because at this point, if you find yourself a squad, and that's the other thing with the squad situation, find yourself some people who are similarly talented and similarly have a similar attitude to how things work. And then if you work together, I think that a lot of things will improve. But if you sit there going it's one person versus the invaders, the likelihood of you being successful becomes a lot smaller. What say you, Web?
I'm forming a team. Let me stop you right there. I'm in. You're in? Yeah, I need friends.
Indeed. That's whatever. And that part stays that's actually in the Snyder Cut too. So that part stays.
You're fast.
Yeah.
That seems like an understatement.
Yeah. So I mean, stuff like that makes sense. But I mean, I think that the grade levels right now, administrators right now who are looking at things forwardly should be sitting there looking like, okay, how do we go and create these super teams at grade levels that don't, if I'm in a middle school, how do I get an English teacher, a PE teacher, an art teacher, a science teacher, all aligned so our curriculums mirror one another so that when a kid comes into class, it's not these different desperate things competing for their time. It's a singular, linear, okay, this builds on that, which builds on that, which builds on that. This is why I love the IB program so much. And if I had a kid, my kid would be in IB schools. It's just being an IB graduate, I have not in any level, and I was a high school graduate. My college classes were not challenging. My master's degree classes were not challenging because of the fact that there was a very clear intention in terms of how all of my high school courses interlocked. And when I went from history to English to art to philosophy, all these people were saying the same things in the same language. It wasn't competing. We all knew they didn't add projects when another person had a project due, whatever. It was all this synergy. And I think that was the beauty of the Snyder Cut. It was this vision. I had this vision, and I brought all these people with me in order to bring this vision to light. But if one person decided to take all that on, we'd still be waiting for the Snyder Cut. It'd be 30 years from now. The dude would still be sitting in the basement somewhere, like wigging out, talking about all this film he has to go over. So if you go it alone, that perspective, the other thing with going it alone is you don't get anybody else's perspective on what the work looks like. And what you could be doing could be totally not right. And you put all this hard work. And that's the other thing, Webbs, that I was going to mention in terms of being a professional teacher now. The concept or the mythology around hard work, right? Totally bogus. Totally bogus. Who works harder, the CEO or the person at the bottom of the company?
Person at the bottom of the company.
Who get paid more, the CEO or the person at the bottom of the company?
CEO definitely does.
Facts. So why we hard work, do work? No. Work smarter, not harder. And work smarter means working together to get things that would have taken you as a single individual a lot of time to do. You cut that stuff in half because now we have 17 people doing that task rather than one. And that's the hustle, Webbs.
I agree. When I was in the classroom, my kids always loved taking on new jobs, like the most random jobs, because, it meant they were contributing to something bigger. It meant that like they felt included and important. And so I was always happy to give them jobs. Like I would dole out jobs like Oprah giving away cars. Like, yes. You get a job and you get a job and you get a job.
And also have a situation where the collaborative nature of what you can do with technology is not shrinking, it's expanding because people are realizing that it's super important for you not to do stuff by yourself. And it doesn't make you a lesser person because you needed help. It just makes you human, which is not a problem. And I think that is the chief barrier to teachers really embracing this deal. Even now, people going back into hybrid, rather than thinking, if I paired with a teacher or 3 or 4 or 5, we could still do exactly what we're doing now, even if we're back physically face to face. We could have one super class in the cloud and then break kids off into little pieces so then everyone eats. But if I'm going to go and try to manage 20 kids on the Google Meet and then 10 in front of me. And I give you a week, 2 weeks maybe before you're like, oh my God, like it's generally bad during the school year around this time because you're looking at May the 26th or whatever you get out of school. But like it's going to be super bad this year because you got to force the testing down people's throats, right? If you're in testing grade levels, you still got to do that's back. In the weed, it has to still be done and all this stuff. You're just pressure on pressure on pressure on pressure on pressure. You got kids who have been, able to do whatever they wanted at their own pace previous to the situation. They're now going to be sitting in for 7 hours and 11 minutes of sitting in a chair. I can't go outside for recess. I can go to the bathroom when I want to. Don't make a lot of sense to you, boy.
Same. I don't get it either.
And the fact that we're going to, when we go back full time or whatever this happens, they're going to totally forget the models that we experimented with and to a large measure were successful and say, nope, it didn't work. Not because we didn't make sure the teachers were trained and that everything was in place and people had the right technology and everything was working. No, we're just going to throw these things away. And I think that's despicable, for lack of a kinder word.
Agreed.
So, in terms of the hustle here, before we get out of the show, just wanted to show again, I've harped on this multiple times. I'm going to keep harping on this because, unfortunately, it does not seem that the powers that be are making sure that people are thinking collaboratively when they're planning their lessons, not singularly. Remember, your evaluation is your evaluation, but no one looks at it and says, no, did you borrow that lesson from somebody else? Did you go and did you have any help? No, none of those questions are asked. Go ahead, Webbs.
I will say that every time, pretty much without fail, as long as my administrator didn't hate me for some reason, I usually did whatever I wanted to do. And as long as I demonstrated that I was including all the best practices, or like, like I could demonstrate that, hey, I'm meeting these standards and this is what my students are getting out of it and they're engaged, like most of my administrators were always like pretty praiseful, and I did well on my evaluations, even if I wasn't being like fidelity to the curriculum or whatever. Like as long as I was demonstrating like I am a competent teacher and I know what I'm doing, I had no problems. Like the proof is in the pudding. Like go talk to my students. They'll, one of the compliments I'd often get, which is a weird one, but is that when my students got to testing time, they did pretty well. And well, beyond like my first, second year of teaching, because nobody's kids do well your first couple years of teaching. Sorry to those classes. It's just how things are. Right. But they'd always do really well. And especially when we moved to like computer-based testing, because I integrated as much technology as I could. So it wasn't an unusual concept when they finally got to the test and had to like type on a keyboard or navigate with a mouse or whatever. They had plenty of experience. And I remember one year my proctor that was with me was like, how do your kids navigate this so well? Well, because we do it every single day. We use computers every single day. They write blogs, they, do video editing, they do all of this stuff. So this isn't an unusual concept for them. They're very comfortable with it, which meant they could focus on the content of the silly test instead. Like, it's not just, if you know your stuff, you know your stuff.
I mean, facts. And I think if you teach kids how to think, they can figure things out. It's not like this is like, the SBAC is not some kind of Mensa level assessment. It is pretty much if I can read and if I got a little bit of common sense and a little bit of problem solving skills, I'm generally going to be all right. If I was exposed to a number of different things, then suddenly I have this background of knowledge that I can go and draw on in order to get these questions correct.
What was the book? I feel like we both read it that did the experiment with the baseball players.
Hirsch's last book. So E.D. Hirsch he mentions it in E.D. Hirsch's last book. And again, these are a bunch of poor Latin kids who had to read a story about baseball. They did great on this.
Oh, no, that's not the example I was thinking of.
Which one? And then the white kids, who were the rich white kids, and they gave them the same test, and the rich white kids didn't do well on it?
No, but you should tell that story as well. I was thinking it was about like baseball players, and they gave one set of baseball players, they would pitch 10 fastballs, 10 curveballs, 10 changeups,
that's
all in that order. And then another group, they would still get 10 fastballs, 10 changeups, and 10 curveballs, but they got them in random order. And it showed that the group that got them in random order, while they were like slower to get it at first, when they were then tested on that with a random series of pitches, they did better because they tested like in random order.
I cannot remember, but I know
that story. We've both read it though. Yeah, I can't think of what it is either.
But Hirsch's last book was they gave a reading passage. Again, is why reading is a bunch of bull crap. Like the mechanical act depends still on your experience with the subject. So in one of the studies that Hirsch cites in the book, he says, they gave this test, reading assessment, to some kids. The reading passage was about baseball. A bunch of poor Latin American kids from Latin America that played baseball were given the deal. They all scored pretty well on the test. They scored better than a bunch of white kids who had never played baseball before, who were reading at a higher level than they were, but they didn't have the actual context of the vocabulary in order to actually answer the questions with fidelity. So the chapter was talking about, again, reading is still an experience based deal, right? If I don't know what you're talking about, again, You can have me. I'm not a patent attorney. If you can, you hand me a book on patent law right now and say like you can read, go in there and argue this case in front of this magistrate. I'm not going to be able to do it, even though I can read the words in context. I have no idea what those words actually mean because they will change from their the general understanding of if I use those same words in education or I use those same words in baseball or whatever. That the meaning, the nuance of the language changes, right? So this is why again this whole not and I'm not saying get rid of mechanical reading. Do kids need to learn how to read? 150% they need to be able to mechanical read. But as we have also said in the show, there are kids who have issues with reading. They will never be able to mechanically read at all because they can't make pictures in their head, or they have some other, if dyslexic. There's a lot of things, and for us to go and push down that idea is this is the only way we know that you're intelligent. That's discriminatory, especially when
Agreed.
it
I
doesn't
think
have
it
to
was
be.
messy. I think the book with the
Jim Harford,
baseball
yeah,
thing
yeah,
was
yeah,
messy.
yeah.
And basically, the whole point of it was that like that messiness, that chaos of getting them in a different order actually prepared them better.
I mean, the other cool story in that Martin Luther King, him reading the crowd and saying, "I got to pivot from this stuff because the people ain't feeling it. Let me pivot to this other thing that I'm just going to make it up and do the stream of consciousness hustle." I mean, that was good. Tim Harford, that messy book is a very very good read. Well, before we get out of here today, straight up, we're going to move this over here. Nope, don't need to do that. Nope, thank you. This is your canvas, and this is where if you are someone who is going to be teaching Clark County or wherever and you got access to Canvas, start to think about not doing it by yourself right now. All right, so great find, Danny. That people tab that is there on the side of the page, clicking that people. Right now, this is just a workroom I fart around with, and I've been farting around with. I play around inside of all these workrooms. But I can add people, and I can also add groups of individuals to my course. So if I wanted to go and add a person, I can add a person by their email. So anybody, they don't have to be at your school. They could be your best friend across school at another school across the city. It could be in anyone who has a Canvas instance at any point. And you can say, you know what? Even though I'm going to teach this, I can make that person a co-teacher in my course. I can make that person a sponge. I can just essentially soak up the information from my course and duplicate that information so they can copy it to their own course if they want to. I can make this person a TA in my course. I make that person a designer. This is one of the things that I'm doing for a number of teachers. Is simply like, you build the content in there and I'll go in and I'll help you design it and move things around and make the colors pretty and stuff like that. But the content, I want to be 100% you, an observer. So if you have a scenario in which you've got your administrator or another your co-teacher or something like that, and you just want that person to look at your stuff and not change anything, you just want them to observe it, you can do that, right? Really, really interesting. The other thing that really to kind of fool around with is the following. So I'm going to show you inside the modules very quickly. Click that. The other thing that's here is if I had published this module, hit that plus sign up here, that edit button at the very top. I can edit this. I can play around with this. All my TAs, I don't think we have the ability to do it, but your co-teachers and your designers could go and play around with that. But there's also this send to button. I can send this module to anyone else that has a Canvas instance. So I can email you the module. I can copy this to any other modules that I am either the designer on or the teacher on. So if I'm a co-teacher in one of your courses, cool, I can send that right to you. So it behooves you, if I was a grade level person, and this is just kind of keeping it 100 and making sure that people get everything they need to deal with. If I were you and I was working in a grade level, one of the things I would do is I would make every teacher a co-teacher in everyone else's course, so that people could go in and say, you know what, after our PLC or GLC or whatever, I'm going to build this thing. You guys can just take it and put in your course instances as well. This is what we want. This is how it's going to look. I would definitely start having those conversations right now. And then beyond the conversation, start putting action plans in place to say, our first unit is going to look like this. And we're going to make sure that every kid, regardless of the teacher they're assigned to, receives the high quality education that is expected from every teacher that's in whatever district you happen to be in. And that includes 21st century skills, that includes social emotional learning, that includes just basically looking at the standards. And that takes a long time for one person to create. If you had 4 or 5 people in your grade level and everyone took a piece of that and everyone showed, hey, we're going to have in 2 weeks, we're going to come back and look at that first unit and everyone contributes, then suddenly you don't have that big of a deal anymore. But if you're asking one person to Snyder cut the whole thing, your chances are very, very low of being successful. Straight up and down. So, I mean, what say you, Webbs?
I totally had a thought and now I'm drawing a blank. It was something that you've said before. Oh, you should start thinking about August now.
Facts. Like
I've seen a few people mention that on social media, which I'm excited to see. Like, start thinking about August now. Start putting those units together. Start figuring out what you're going to be teaching. Assume that I've seen anywhere from 25 to 40% of kids and families want to stick with virtual because it works for them. So, like, it is doing a disservice if they suddenly just have to go back to class. Like, so many families I've seen who are like, oh, my kid doesn't get distracted by having their peers around. Black kids in particular don't have to deal with the social pressures of, you know, being quite possibly the only Black kid or one of only a few in a class. And then the whole awkwardness of dealing with all of that and the pressure from their classmates. So, like, there are a lot of kids that benefit from virtual learning that they don't want that to go away. And it has nothing to do with, like, yeah, go ahead.
They've already said that there's going to be a distance option in August here. So if you're not planning to have and then remember, we haven't even had spring break in the Valley yet. So they're going to be, they have celebrated, the 5%. Dude, we're about to have an influx of people into the city and an influx of people out of the city and then back into the city and going to places where everyone's not vaccinated. So we have that situation popping off. There's still people at schools that are getting it and stuff like that. I would
also being vaccinated doesn't mean that you don't pass the disease on to other people.
Facts. So, I mean, if I err on the side of caution here, I would make sure, first of all, asynchronous work benefits everybody. It's kind of like PSYOP strategies, right? I want to be visual, not because the kid doesn't speak English, because being visual is just the best way to do stuff, right? So doing things asynchronously gives a kid, regardless of whether they're in the classroom with you or at home, the opportunity to go at their own pace. It also saves you the frustration of having to repeat yourself over and over and over again because some kid didn't understand it or they weren't paying attention or they were throwing spitballs in the back of the thing. A lot of the constant things that we've battled previously, the technology will solve now. Go ahead, Webbs.
It also gives parents a front row seat to the lesson. So the bill that's been introduced for teachers to post their lessons on a school website or something, that actually feels like a step backward. Because if you're creating content that's asynchronous in Canvas or whatever your LMS is, like, the parent can sit there and watch the whole lesson. They don't have to, like, piece it back together from whatever you've posted on the website and misinterpret it and all that kind of, like, they can just go watch it, or they can watch it with their student, or the grown-up can watch it with a kid. Like, just put it on the LMS.
That makes way too much sense, though, Webbs. And the thing is, a lot of stuff, if you're aware of it, do it. It's not a scenario in which, like, trying to run it through. Is it okay? Stop with the, like, do it because it's the best thing for kids to be able to deal with. And one of the things you will see is once you build it, they will come. It's like the Field of Dreams, right? It's not, don't wait to build the stadium.
Uh-oh.
What's up? What's up? Webbs?
Okay, there we go.
Once they build it, then you're straight. You're moving. We can see you moving your hands.
Okay, cool.
Once you build the Field of Dreams, then the legends come and they pack the stands and things pop off. But if you sit planning the Field of Dreams every month and whatever and never get to the actual construction of it, then we have an issue and whatnot. So, I mean, part of it is just like getting your squad. Is again, once you watch the Justice League movie, if you look at all the comic book movies, right, it's a single bad guy that thinks they can take 7 or 8 people. And that generally doesn't work, right? The 7 or 8 differently abled people generally can create, using all their skill sets, some path to kill the big bad. And Steppenwolf gets his really, like the Josh Whedon version is all sanitized. The Zack Snyder cut, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It is amazing. The last 35 minutes of that movie, amazing.
Spoilers.
I mean, no, I didn't say it. What happens? It's just amazing. It's a lot better than the Joss Whedon situation, but it's not possible if everyone doesn't cooperate, because the big bad can take any of them one-on-one outside of Superman. He can take anyone else one-on-one and defeat them, but he can't take them all together. So, something to consider. Webbs, any parting shots?
Even Superman has a weakness, because he, is going to go save people if he can save people instead of punishing the bad guy.
Facts.
So he couldn't do it without the rest of the Justice League.
And Kryptonite still hems him up.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he does die in the Batman vs. Superman flick. So he does die.
Martha!
And there is an extended cut of that if you want to sit and spend 3.5 hours watching that.
No, I don't want to do that.
That's an extended cut of that as well. I got suckered into that one because I just put it on and I didn't realize it was 3.5 hours. And generally with movies, if I started, I'd stay up and finish them. That was a mistake. So I will never watch a Snyder Cut again. One time, I'm good. I will not spend 4 hours of my life watching a movie that, again, is better than the first one, but still objectively not a good movie.
All right.
Indeed. Go find yourself a group of super friends that you can go and get your stuff created with. Man, go get it. We do have the Q stuff. So the Queued Up event is coming in June. But you can go and you can buy your tickets right now if you want to. queuedup.theintelligenthoodlums.com. You can check that out. And that's going to have
early bird ticketing. Yeah, early bird ticketing is happening now, but I think that ends in April.
So you got a couple weeks. So yeah, we got that situation. There are a couple of things that the state is doing for Canvas. We're probably going to do some kind of like mini 3-day-ish type thing. If I feel up to it, Webbs, I'll converse with you about the situation. But nothing long like last year, like some 3-day really, really quickly to get people kind of oriented. But the state I know has like some Canvas stuff that's coming on that is free or freemium. There is, if you go into your district, if you're in Clark County, go into and log into CCSD, there is like a Nevada Canvas something up there at the top that you can deal with. They also are going to, on Fridays, there's like an hour for office hours for some of the OBL folks to answer your Canvas questions, so you can deal with that as well. And we're hoping to get one of them on one of our shows so they can talk to you directly. I'm still in negotiations about getting one of them on just so they can kind of answer your Canvas questions. As the only issue with like them is I don't know what they can say and what they can't say, like independent of the deal. So they're not as free as we are. Just like, that's what I feel and we can say it. So if it happens, we'll let you know. All right, Webb's about to do the thing. All right, God bless America. We got one more week before spring break. Just take it a little bit at a time.
Episode?
No, we got one more week before the deal.
Oh, I thought you were saying we were going on spring break.
No,
maybe we should go on spring
break.
Oh,
we go on to spring break. Yeah, there'll be no spring break episodes. But we have one more week, Clark County School District people. One more week. Once we get to Friday, kick your shoes off. Then you might want to see the Snyder Cut then, because you're not going to go to school one day. But get those things knocked out. And we will see you hopefully on Thursday and then Sunday, and then we'll take the rest of the time off.